of the United Nations. And most important among these is what we talk often so lightly about, and that is peace. Peaceful means, collective measures. The Kuala Lumpur Initiative is taking this one step further by, as my colleague Professor Shodadovsky said, one step further, and that is to criminalize war. Anything that has to do with starting a war is a crime against humanity. That is the philosophy, the motto, the argument of the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission and the War Crimes Trial. And we must become much more aware of that. Some UN member countries, the US and the government of Bush II, have consistently and purposely ignored international law, charter law, the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, in carrying out the economic sanctions. And there are repeated acts of aggression during that period of sanctions. The no-fly zone behavior of the US and the British Air Force were brutal acts of aggression against innocent people. And not only in December 1998, when I had just arrived in Baghdad and Operation Desert Fox started. That was a brutal beginning of aggression that continued through 1999 and until the end of sanctions, when the illegal war began. More hidden from the public eye is something else. More hidden is that the US and the UK governments of the time were instrumental in the United Nations Security Council to convert, yes, what was legally adopted in 1999 when Iraq illegally invaded Kuwait. We have to acknowledge that. But what they did was they legally adopted sanctions were converted primarily by these two governments into illegal suppression. Two governments could not heed what we demanded as insiders, that the UN Charter should be taken seriously in giving weight, and the same weight, in fact, to protecting individuals and civilians and at the same time attaining the political objectives of the Security Council. In Iraq, sanctions became that had started, if you want, as an instrument of peace, very quickly became a weapon of war. The impact of these 13 years of sanctions and the impact of the 2003 war and the occupation that followed in terms of loss of life, in terms of the mental and physical disabilities of the survivors, there's no difference. The government of President Bush II became a leader, in a way, in the misuse of the UN like a toolbox. You pick the tool when it suits you, or you leave it in the box when you don't need it. And unfortunately, that toolbox that was created to promote peace around the world, understanding, dialogue, tolerance, all these good words that have a deep meaning to serious people, were not used. That toolbox was not used by the US government to repair that vehicle of international peace and security, but to keep Iraq locked up. No dialogue, no reconciliation, no concern for the welfare and the dignity. Mustn't we also remember that all of us, you as individuals, I as an individual, we want to be respected. We want to enjoy dignity. Iraqis did not get any dignity or respect from those who were appointed by the global community to look after their welfare. And so it became a use of power. It wasn't at all a use of law. And on top of all this, we had to face, as UN officials, we had to face every day the power of manipulated information, where we would say something in Iraq and in Washington and in London that same information was turned around, and instead of acknowledging that food was distributed equitably, we learned from the media that in Washington and in London, the argument was food was mishandled, UN people didn't know what to do, some people got it, other people didn't get it. It was a warfare playing with information. And I would say the threats against all who disagreed. If you disagreed as a member country in the UN General Assembly or in the UN Security Council with the policies of Washington and London, you were quickly made aware of it. Sometimes by very painful elimination of aid or by other means of threats. I come to more or less to the end of what I want, but I need, I hope with your agreement, 2 more minutes. The Iraq, under sanction, was condemned to a life of war, even, ladies and gentlemen, when there was no war, the years of sanction. The US and the UK within the UN Security Council, please accept this for me, were the only 2 governments that ensured that there was a heavy bureaucracy in the supply of humanitarian goods. These 2 governments were the only ones who made sure that many necessary supplies, chemicals for water treatment, spare parts for the oil industry, electricity equipment for hospitals, pesticides for agriculture, education materials, medical supplies, were blocked, were not allowed to come in. All of that, to me, is a stark reminder that rights to impose sanctions cannot be unlimited. And by extension, I would say this rule is analogous to the primary rule of humanitarian law, which is means of warfare are not unlimited. The 1907 Hague Convention states that very clearly. The rights of belligerents, the rights of those who fight each other to adopt means of injuring the enemy are not unlimited. My conclusions, I have 4 very brief conclusions here. Let us, you and us, let there be a strong bonding. Let out of this important, don't underestimate the Kuala Lumpur initiative of Dr. Mahathir. You are here in Kuala Lumpur, most of you. We are far away, but we are with you. Every day we think of Kuala Lumpur and that initiative. So let us never relent in the efforts to restore justice for the people of Iraq. Let us never relent to reinstall the respect and honesty of the United Nations. Sanctions, as practiced by the US and the UK and others inside and outside the UN, amounted to warfare. Violations of international law related to the laws of war and the laws in war. For the US and the UK and others, economic sanctions were simply part of the arsenal of warfare. We, as the public, we as maybe a conscience, a beginning, a growing conscience of resistance, we must insist on the accountability of offenders. And that with all the determination that is demanded by that request or that insistence that equality is equal for everyone before that law. I don't think there's an alternative.